Mike.
My name is Mike Heavey, and I am an alcoholic. Shalom, amigos. I feel like a mosquito at a nudist colony. I'm really excited, but I don't know where to get started. But I really do know where to get started, and that's to say thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thanks so much for all the people that put this together. This is my fourth time to the Ocean Shores Jamboree. I met Jeannie in a meeting in Hawaii. She's on the committee about 7 years ago. We were both from the state of Washington. We stuck up a friendship. And then last year I said, God, I'd be interested in maybe speaking next year. And then bam, here I am. This is my first time speaking at a major, what I'd call a major AA conference. I realize for some of our speakers, it's not very major, but it's major for me. Now, Pee Wee, thank you. Thank all the volunteers. Let's all give them a big hand. Really a super deal. But before I go any farther, I want to talk about a little resentment that I've gotten over the weekend here. The first is my resentment at the committee for putting me last behind some unbelievable speakers and all the intimidation that causes, sleepless nights. So I learned a long time ago when I got a resentment, I needed to do a quick fourth step and a fifth step. So how many have done the 12 steps? Raise your hand. All right, that's super. All right, you're going to be my temporary sponsors for the next 2 minutes. All right, I wrote this out last night. I'm resentful at the committee for putting me last. The cause they made me go last affects my sleep and my self-esteem. And what's my part in it? Well, I don't. I'm an innocent victim on this thing. I've got no part in it. And I got a resentment at Allison. She went first. I'm jealous of that. The cause is that she can read me like the cheap novel that I am. And it affects my sleep again. I didn't sleep very well last night. And again, I have no part in it. I'm the innocent victim. Is Julie here? Okay. No, Jeannie. Well, anyway, I've got a resentment against Julie, but she's not here, so I won't mention it. So, Jack, you're the first Al-Anon person I could ever really relate to or really felt like that you understood me. You really understood me. But my resentment about you is you are a real life hero, but you took away from part of my talk about wanting to be a hero, and that also affects my sleep and my self-esteem. I don't think it affects my sex relations, but I don't know. We'll see. And Sheldon, wow. I want you to know, Sheldon, you're not the only guy whose father walked out on their mom and left them with 3 little kids, housing project. And I also grew up in a small Jewish neighborhood. But I don't think there was any anti-Gentilian sentiment going around. I think it was okay on that. I didn't have that feeling about that. And, well, it also affects my sleep. So when I would do my, what I call my mini fifth steps with my sponsor, I would do a little bit of Gestalt therapy at the end of it to try to, take a doll and pound it. And so, does anybody know what this is? Yeah. But Elaine asked me the other day in my hotel room, what's that? And I said, well, it's a reasonable facsimile of my, then I stopped. Is Corey here? Yeah, Corey's here. This is not a prop for a porn movie. So I'm going to give a Bronx whistle to all my people that I have resentments at. Okay, I got that out of my way. Seriously, wow. What a great group of speakers. Let's give them a big hand. Thanks. I haven't been able to confess this for many years. I am CIA, Catholic Irish Alcoholic. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a place where Catholics can go to meetings in Protestant church basements to avoid Jewish psychiatrists. My story is very, very simple. All I ever wanted was to feel good and be happy and maybe a little bit of the time be the hero. My hero growing up, we were pretty poor. We didn't have a TV. And the only show I got to watch all week with the neighbors was Roy Rogers. And I went to bed every night thinking about Roy Rogers, my hero. I grew up in Seattle, went to Garfield High School. I graduated from Garfield High School in 1965. I see you got a few of, you see another one out there. Good to see you. I'm 65 years of age. Was in the Army from 1967 to 70, and I went to Vietnam, Jack. Just wasn't Vietnam era. I came back, got out of the Army in December of 70, went back to the University of Washington, graduated in 73, went to law school, graduated in 76 from Santa Clara University. And I would note today is Armistice Day, and Armistice Day was 1934 was the day that Bill started his last drinking spree before Heavey came in, and then he ended up in the town's hospital where he had his spiritual experience. In 1986, I ran for, and unfortunately I was elected to the state legislature, and I served there in Olympia for 14 years. And at the end of that, well, it was a great place for a practicing alcoholic like I was, because the money wasn't very good, but basically all the booze you wanted was for free, and it was pretty good. Good scotch, good wine, etc. Just was everywhere. But after 14 years in 2000, I decided I was sick and tired of the special interests owning all the legislatures, causing gridlock. I was tired of the backstabbing. I was tired of the mudslinging. So I decided I was going to clean up Olympia. I decided not to run for re-election. My sponsor is Vic Kepler. My home group is Dawn Patrol in West Seattle, and thanks so much for my homies being here. Thank you. Very much appreciated. My sobriety date, that's another resentment I got. I've got the shortest sobriety date of any of the speakers, is May 11th, 2002. And I went to treatment in 1998. And so it took me 5 years to get 1 year. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later. Although I did have 16 years once, clean and sober. Then I went to a party my sophomore year in high school. A friend of mine had taken, his parents had a liquor cabinet, which I was really jealous of, but he would take like a half inch out of each bottle of bourbon, gin, etc., and put it in a big Coke bottle and put the top back on the Coke bottle. And we split that. And like Sheldon said, I can remember that first experience. Wow. It was just unbelievable. I mean, it became my solution. I said, God, this is what the adults are been hiding from me. This is the answer. This is fun. Now, that pretty much became my solution for the next 30-some years. My first sponsor would, whenever I had a problem, which was often, I would whine to him and he would say, let's read the bottom page 13. And on the bottom page 13, it says something like, we would have the elements of a way of living that answered all my problems. And then my sponsor would say, now, which problem of yours does that leave out? And I would say, well, I don't think it leaves any out. However, our literature does talk about we don't have all the answers. AA does not have all the answers, and that we sometimes might want to get religious or medical help. Now, my father walked out on my mother, left her in a government housing project with 3 little kids. I was the oldest at 4 in 1950. I had a huge resentment about that, but it wasn't half the resentment to a man I greatly admired, which was my grandfather. My grandfather, my mother's father, was justifiably angry at my father. Now, my father, though, didn't know any better. I really do believe he was doing the best he could with what he had. And what happened to him is he's in Chicago at age 6, and his mother dies. His mother dies, and his father can't handle 6 kids, so he gets put in an orphanage for the next 10 years, as do all his siblings. So he never really had a mother or a father. He didn't know what he's supposed to even act like. And he was an alcoholic. He died last January, and I had pretty much forgiven him when he died, and I said so before he died. Now, but I'm about 13, I'm all of 5 feet tall and 95 pounds, and I'm at my grandfather's and grandmother's 50th wedding anniversary. It's a big party, and for some reason, my grandfather and I get split out, and we've got a little bit of an argument. And he ended the argument by just saying this. He said, Mike, you're like your dad. You're no damn good. And that was like an arrow going through my heart. And it stuck in my heart for a long, long time. And I always wondered, was I good enough? Was I good? Did I have that God force in me, that good God force? So when I did a 4th and a 5th step around that resentment towards my grandfather, I could never get a real solid healing like I could on a lot of my resentments. So in 2005, I was on a vision quest. A vision quest is a Native American spiritual journey, and it went 11 days to southeast Utah. 7 days were outside, sleeping under the stars, and 4 of those 7 were by myself in the wilderness and fasting for 4 days. And the leader of our group was a psychologist. And so I started telling him that story about my grandfather. And I was saying, maybe I was behaving like a brat. Maybe that's what attracted my grandfather to say those things to me. And he said, Mike, no, you got it all wrong. He's the adult. All kids behave like brats. It was his fault. It's not your fault. He was wrong. And when he told me that, I got a healing that I'd never got by doing a 4th or a 5th step on that issue. So if you've ever if you make the mistake like I did, you've ever been verbally abused, physically abused, sexually abused, God forbid, they're at fault. You've got nothing to do with it. And I also think if you have a hard time with the resentment, you might want to take a look at help from medical people. I have a good friend in AA. His name's Randy, lives in the Palm Springs area. And his special mission in AA is that every once in a while he talks about being sexually abused as a kid by a stepfather. And his mission is to help other men who've had similar sexual abuse. And whenever he sees me, he says, Mike, you're good. Mike, you are good enough. And it just warms my heart because he knows exactly what I want to hear. And I tell him exactly the same thing. The abuse to a child is so damaging. Now, since the getting out of the Army, I developed this fear of public speaking that bordered on being panicked. So it's a little bit of a miracle for me even to be up here in front of you this morning. And you might say, well, how does a guy get elected to the legislature if he's afraid of public speaking? And in the late 1970s, I went to the doctor. He took a blood test, called me back in and said, Mike, I've got some bad news for you. We just looked at your blood test. You've got a very serious Valium deficiency. But don't worry about it. We can give you prescriptions and supplements to get your Valium count back up. And so for the next 20 years, I would pop a Valium if I had to speak in public. And it got me by. Never got me comfortable, but it got me by. And then when I got to treatment in 1998 for alcoholism, for booze, they had the nerve to take away my Valium. Hey, I've got a prescription for that. And they told me it hits the same receptors in the brain that alcohol does. If you keep using that, you will relapse. So for me, I know now that Valium is my solid form of alcohol. It might as well be taking it. I love the movies. Jack is in the movie business. Really cool to be a stuntman. And I, like I said, I really loved your talk because you spoke to me. So I've decided maybe I could do this. I love Al-Anon because I can do the 12 steps and I can also drink. So I may go to Al-Anon. My favorite movie is Groundhog Day. The last few years, I've had some friends in AA come over to my house on every February 2nd to watch Bill Murray in Groundhog Day because it's about me. It's about a self-centered, selfish jerk who's miserable. He becomes almost suicidal. He turns to a higher power. He starts serving others. He becomes happy and he gets everything he wants. Wow. It was once voted the greatest, by a group of Buddhists, voted it the greatest Buddhist movie of all time, Groundhog Day. Another favorite movie of mine is High Noon, and that's why I got the train whistle. 1952, the big scene is the marshal's in the middle of the street, all by himself. The clock is striking noon, and the whistle blows. I'm not going to blow it, Bob. And I'll talk a little bit more on that later. But by 1998, I am in my own Groundhog Day. I'm waking up every single morning with a vicious hangover, physical hangover, and it could easily be accompanied by a legal hangover, a financial hangover, a relationship hangover. And each morning I say, I am not going to drink tonight because I do not want to feel like this tomorrow morning. And by this time, my good old buddy Willpower, which had got me through so many things, had left me. And by noon, 1 o'clock, my hangover had worn off. And by 5:36, I'm drinking again. And then bam, back in Groundhog Day the next morning, hungover. And it takes me a while to figure these things out. My sponsor later told me you had a moment of clarity. After 60, 90 days in the winter and spring of 1998, I woke up again. I'm not going to drink tonight. I don't want to feel like this tomorrow. And then I said, I say this every morning. It took me a while to figure that out. So I'm not getting it done. It ain't happening. I need some help. So, at that point, my programming, there's a saying in computers, garbage in, garbage out. My programming in was selfishness and self-centeredness, and I was getting nothing but garbage back out. I was not feeling good. I was not happy. I was a coward. I certainly wasn't a hero. And I was into this idol thing. I wanted to be the American Idol. I would totally ignore that I suffered from stage fright, didn't know the words and couldn't sing. And I was into this idle thing, idle time. I would go to work hungover and I'd just look out the window. I now know that's another word for that is sloth. And I also had suicidal ideation. I have a interest in a house up in Moclips, and I remember driving between Ocean Shores and Moclips many times drunk. And there's a big tree right by Seabrook, and I said, maybe I ought to just drive into that tree. Maybe that would be the best for everybody. At least my wife would get my life insurance policy. At least there'd be something positive there. And I don't know if I was a coward or just didn't recognize. I never did it. But whenever I read in the paper about somebody driving into a telephone pole or a tree, I said, that guy did what I had thought about, possibly. So I go into work that morning where I said I need some help. And I go see my best friend. He's also my business partner, and he's also my employer. He retains me. And I said, Bill, I need some help to stop drinking. And he said, I know exactly what to do. And what I didn't know is he had a family member that he was concerned about their drug and alcohol use. So he'd gone to a treatment facility and gone through the family program. So he knew a little bit about treatment and AA and 12 steps. And so he got me in this treatment center. And about 2 days before I was headed to the treatment center, I went into his office and I said, now, Bill, this treatment center, it doesn't have anything to do with Alcoholics Anonymous, does it? And he said, well, Mike, all these treatment centers are 12-step based. And I said, oh, good, as long as it doesn't have anything to do with Alcoholics Anonymous. And today that statement just rings. I am so stupid. I am so ignorant. I am so insane. And just because I'm sober doesn't mean I'm not drinking now. It doesn't mean I can't go back to that or be involved with it. I had no idea what was best for me. I had no idea what would give me a life. I had no idea what would save my life. I now belong to the largest organization in the world that no one ever wanted to be a member of. I'm a proud member. I went to treatment on morning of May 28, 1998. And I arrived at in my second night. There was a Friday night, May 29th, 1998, and there's an AA meeting. And by this time, I figure out, well, there is a connection here. Well, I'll just go with it. And this fellow was conducting the AA meeting. He was from the outside. He'd been a patient, but he was now on the outside. And so he came in as part of service to do a AA meeting for the patients. And he got up and said, for me, drinking and drugging was like making love to an 800-pound gorilla. Said the sex was great, but it wasn't over till the gorilla said it was over. I just love that. I said, I thought this was all gloom and doom here. This guy's actually makes me smile. You know, and I think when I laugh, I feel good. I feel God. There's something about laughter. I love it. And this guy, and not only that, that's described my drinking a little bit. When I started drinking, I didn't know where it was going to end up. And it was going to be a lot of fun. At the beginning, it was a lot of fun. You know, I could end up in Los Angeles. I could end up in Hawaii. I could end up married. You know, I could end up being a bigamist. You know, but the only thing I did right in early sobriety after I got out of treatment was I got a sponsor. And it was a person I really was attracted to. He had everything that I didn't. He was comfortable in his own skin. He'd been around a while. I'd actually known him before I went to treatment. His name was John Beeson. He was a great man. He saved my life. He gave me a life. I owe him a tremendous debt of gratitude. He died in 2008 after being my sponsor for 10 years. He died of a heart attack, clean and sober at the age of 72. I still miss him. Now, do you know what the difference between an AA member and a puppy dog is? And the answer is that after 3 weeks, the puppy dog quits whining. And early on, I really whined a lot, and I didn't like meetings. I thought there were way too much whining going on. And so I didn't go to very many meetings in my first couple years. And I didn't do the steps. I'd meet with my sponsor one night a week, and we'd read Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox. And after about 22 months of my sobriety, I said, John, I don't think the program's working for me. And I wasn't feeling good. I wasn't happy. And he just laughed. And he said, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is working for and helping millions of people. Mikey's program sucks. You don't go to meetings. You've never done the steps. How could you possibly say you're in the program? You're not in the program. So then a little bit later, he said, Mike, just someday, maybe you're going to see a flash of light and hear a loud pop. And I said, John, what will that be? A flash of light and a loud pop. He said, Mike, that will be your head coming out of your ass. So I had been doing, I had admitted my life was unmanageable and I was powerless, step one, and I came to believe that I could be restored to sanity, although I couldn't see it, that I was totally insane at the time. And I made a decision to turn my will over to the care of my higher power. But I'd been doing that for I'd been doing step 3.5 for about 2 years. And at that point, I said, okay, how do we do a 4-step? So my sponsor told me how to do a 4-step. I put pen to paper. And shortly thereafter, I went to a priest at Seattle U because I didn't want to tell my sponsor what I was afraid of. Things like I'm afraid of speaking in public. I didn't want him to know that. And it was only after a little while I started telling him that, I take Valium when I speak in public. I was really ashamed of that. And so I went to a priest in Seattle. I figured between the priest was in the program, and between being a priest and in the program, I could do it with some confidence, and I'd probably never have to see him again. And so I went and did because I knew I was going to unload. And I can literally say that it's the most important thing I ever did in my life, a fourth step and a fifth step. I walked out of that fifth step. I was literally 2 feet off the ground. I was 50 pounds lighter. Big smile on my face. You know, you could have run me over with a car, and I think I would have still been smiling. And I also think I saw a flash and heard a loud pop. Looking back, my problem was fear. And I liked Sheldon's description of that last night at angst. I call it, when you take the alcohol out of this alcoholic, I still have the ick. And I have it in my stomach, and it sits there. And I don't know whether you call it low-level anxiety, the hole in your soul, the knot in your gut, angst, or whatever. I had it. However, I don't think I had it when I was real young. A friend of mine says, I didn't have a drink in kindergarten, but I sure could have used one. And I don't relate to that because I'm more 13, 14, 15. That's when I started looking at girls and having a different interest than just friendship. That's when I started getting that feeling in my stomach. And then it just, through high school, it just got worse. I just had this, I get no other word for it, but ick. And so when I took that drink at 16 years of age, wow, that ick went away. I felt that ease and comfort. And I'm just happy that it wasn't there. Amazing. So I go to this opera. My daughter's got a bit part in this opera. And it's called The Ring. It's a German Wagnerian opera. It's a series of 4 operas. And there's this character. His name is Siegfried. And he has a unique characteristic. He's born without fear and he lives without fear. And I'm a slow learner. A couple days later, I say, oh, the significance of that is if he's unique, that means everybody else in the opera has fear. Maybe they got that ick in their stomach like I do. And then I thought a little bit farther and says, well, maybe everybody in the audience has fear. Maybe I'm not unique. Maybe I'm not the only one that has that feeling. And then a little bit later I said, well, maybe everybody in the world has that feeling. Maybe I got a little bit more than others. And I'm in that group of people that when I drink, that feeling goes away. But so I started to, where's that ick come from? Where's this fear, this low-level anxiety come from? And the 12 by 12 says, fear comes from being afraid of losing something we have or not getting something we want. And that just didn't do it for me. Because you can put a gun to my head, I'm afraid of losing my life, but you move the gun and pretty much the fear goes away. I'm okay. It doesn't always stick with me, that ick. So that didn't do it for me. And so I was at a meeting and this fellow was talking about, this is what kind of really, and I'll explain why, but this concept really hit me. And that's the first story in the Bible, the first parable in the Bible about Adam and Eve. And they're in this perfect state of being. They're happy, joyous, and free. And they're enlightened, they're in heaven, whatever you want to call it. They don't have an ick in their stomach. And they're told, there's only one rule here, and that's you don't eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And a little bit while later, the serpent comes in and says, "Who says you can't eat the fruit?" Adam and Eve say, "Well, God says." "What's going to happen if you eat the fruit?" "God says we're going to die." "Ah, you're not going to die. Not only that, the fruit tastes good. You'll like it. And here's why he doesn't want you to eat it. Because it'll make you more powerful than God." So one of the key things for me was the serpent is not some outside devil. Serpent is my ego, my selfishness, my self-centeredness, my pride, my self-esteem. And what I say when I see some nice fruit, I want it, and I want it now. I don't have to play by the rules that everybody else plays by. I'm going to take it if I can not get thrown in jail for doing it. And when I had that realization that it's me, the only negative force in my life is me, that was a huge thing. So Adam and Eve give in to their egos, and they eat the fruit. And the first thing that happens to them is they see that they are naked and they are ashamed. So I go, oh, I can relate to being ashamed and feeling guilty. And then the next thing happens is God comes looking for them and they are afraid. Bam, there's the fear. There's that low level of anxiety, that ick in my stomach. So at that point I realized, I think my life has been full of selfish acts that then morph into shame and guilt and then morph into fear. And that's where I got the ick in my stomach. A lifetime of selfish acts. So when I did that fifth step, I believe that was the unburdening was a life of selfish acts that had resulted in shame, guilt, and fear. And each one of them was probably just a minor thing. But I believe the disease for me is so progressive because they just start accumulating, and the fear gets bigger and bigger the older I get. Now, one thing I learned from 6 and 7, and 4 and 5, I just had this tremendous release, this unburdening. And I learned that in 6 and 7, if I'm going to avoid fear in the future, shame and guilt, I need to quit acting in a selfish way. I think 6 and 7 get a tremendous short shrift. They each have about a paragraph in the big book. I'm about 3-4 years of age, and I still remember looking up at my mother. I could look up at the bottom of this ironing board, and my mother's ironing clothes, and she says, "Michael, I'm going into the other room. Do not touch this iron. It's hot." Well, I had no concept of what hot meant. She leaves the room. I go up and I put my hand on the iron. Just really a lot of pain. And I have never, ever had an inclination to touch a hot iron again. Now, but I never connected that ick in my stomach with my selfish acts, like putting my hand on an iron. I now do. So if I want to avoid shame, guilt, fear in the future, I need to give up my character defects. I should introduce myself. When I'm drinking, I'm a liar, a cheat, and a thief. And I engage in the 7 deadly sins: pride, lust, anger, greed, gluttony, envy, sloth. And when I got here, I really believed that the 7 deadly sins were assets and attributes to be wanted. Maybe talk about pride. The Marines talk about the pride, black pride. You got to be confident about yourself. I had no idea what humility meant. Lust. Who doesn't like to get laid? We're all here because we like to get laid. Anger. A lot of important people get angry. Greedy. Remember Michael Douglas in the movie Wall Street said, greed is good. And no one argued with him. Gluttony. I still suffer from gluttony. I'm going to start anew. Still have a hard time driving by the grocery store in the evenings. And ice cream is calling to me, calling my name. I'm going to thought about forming a new 12-step group, call it BAJA, B-A-J-A. It stands for Ben & Jerry's Anonymous. But that isn't the killer that alcohol is, so I'll wait on that one. So, envy, I used to compare my insides, that icky insides, with other people's outsides. The difference between a Porsche and a porcupine. The porcupine has the pricks on the outside. I used to think driving a Porsche was really cool. And I envied people that drove Porsches. And sloth, wow. I mean, how many hours I wasted away just looking out the window. And 8 and 9, I repaired the relationships with family, friends, and acquaintances. It used to be, from spending 14 years in Olympia, there's a lot of disagreements down there. It's almost hand-to-hand combat at times. And there were alleys in this state I would not walk down because I was afraid I'd get a hatchet in the middle of my back. And I can safely say there's not a place I fear going at this time, or a person that I fear running into. I've done over 30 9-step amends. And the last one I did was the most difficult. My sponsor would say, you do not owe him an amend. He owes you an amend. But it kept bothering me. And I looked for my part in it. I approached the person. And it was the most powerful amend that I ever did, the most difficult one. Now, I used to do the 10th step a little bit differently than I do now. And it was I continued to take the personal inventory of others, and when they were wrong, I promptly pointed it out. And I can now say I do it a little bit differently. I take my own inventory. I did last night. I said, was I at all humble yesterday? Ask myself. And when you're wrong, promptly admitting it, wow, that has saved me a lot of pain over the years. That one little message, as soon as I promptly admit it, apologize, or recognize my error, life gets so much better. I do seek through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with my higher power, and sometimes only before I got up here, second to second. Page 68 is probably the most important page in my life right now, the big book. It talks about fear. And at the bottom of the last paragraph, it talks about that we ask him to remove our fear and direct us to what he would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow our fear. Well, I've at page 68, whenever I feel that pang of fear, I'm getting myself pretty much conditioned to not sit there and let it eat at me. I just say, God, remove my fear and direct me to what you would have me be. And I'm just telling you, it is a very powerful thing. I have had a spiritual awakening, but only as the result of these steps. And I tried to keep a semblance of it going, feeling good and being happy by trying to carry the message to other alcoholics and to practice these principles in all my affairs. You know, in my work, most of the people I work with are not in the program, and they're just amazed sometimes at some of the things I say from the program, and I don't have the heart to tell them I learned it here, but that's where I did learn. There's a story about three old guys, old joke about three old guys sitting on a park bench, and they're talking about the world's greatest inventions. And the first one says, well, I think the wheel, and the other two nod their head, is the world's greatest invention. And the second one said, I think the world's greatest invention is the Boeing 747. The other two nod their head. And the third guy says, I think the thermos bottle is the world's greatest invention. And the other two go, what? And he said, yes. When you put something hot in a thermos bottle, it stays hot. And when you put something cold in a thermos bottle, it stays cold. And the other two go, so? And he says, how do it know? And yes, I know they had the Oxford groups and the 6 steps, and Dr. Silkworth taught us that it was a disease and that we're powerless over it, and that Carl Jung talked about a psychic change. But how did they know that my problems were my resentments, my fear, and my sexual misconduct? How did they know that? I mean, if they would have sat me down and said, here's your problem. You're angry. You're full of resentments. That's all you think about. You're afraid of your own shadow. And by the way, you've been really screwing around sexually, and that's screwing up a lot of things. I would have probably ran out the door. But that's what was my problem. My selfishness and self-centeredness had led me to a very, very dark place. And then not only did they know the problem, they came up with a solution. The 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. That is a solution. Wow. And the only answer is it's a miracle. It's a miracle. People are not, Homo sapien are not capable of, let alone recognizing the problem, but coming up with a solution. It is God-given, and it is a tremendous gift that I often forget what a beautiful thing it is, but it's, as I said, it's given me a life. There's a lot of weight loss programs, some diets, and what I needed in 1998, I needed somebody to say, we need to put you on a fear loss program. For me, it really was the main thing. The resentments were interesting, but really I was afraid of my own shadow in so many ways. It built up over a lifetime. I didn't have that when I was younger. I certainly could not have ever been a hero. I was a coward. But that's exactly what exactly what the 12 steps have done for me. It's not a weight reduction, it's a fear reduction. It removed fear basically from my life. And when it rears its ugly head again, I know what to do about it. I just do page 68. Remove my fear, God, and direct me to what you would have me be. And then when I eliminate fear, I don't need to take a drink. I have the opportunity to take the right action, the courageous action. My heroes were Roy Rogers when I grew up, and Superman a little bit. Hardly practical. Now my heroes are people that faced fear, Dr. Martin Luther King, Abraham Lincoln, that faced tons of fear, and they took the right action, the courageous action. And I know one thing about both those men of courage, they're men of faith. And it was their faith that got them to take courageous acts. But what's absolutely getting to being the hero or doing something courageous, I have to do the 12 steps. I cannot be courageous when I'm in my fear, when I'm in my resentments, in my selfish conduct. I just can't get there. I have a chance if I do the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, unfortunately for you, I have overcome my fear of public speaking. And I thought I would just take a couple minutes to tell you how I did that, in case you might have a fear. You know, Roy's a golf pro. Some people have a fear of making a 3-foot putt. I think this would apply to that too. And on May 10th, 2002, I had a fairly big, stressful speaking. I popped a Valium. So my birthday now is May 11th, 2002. I have not taken a hit of Valium since that time. Now, one of the big things for me to overcome my fear of public speaking, was that willpower was absolutely useless. No matter how much concentration, no matter how much self-talk of you are cool. I remember I used to say, you are cool, calm, and collected, trying to self my talk into something and the more I self-talked, the worse it was. Could not self-talk or willpower my way out of fear of public speaking. So I had to recognize I did first step. I'm powerless over fear. I'm powerless over my ego. I'm not really powerless over alcohol. I am powerless over my selfish conduct, my ego, my fear. And then 6 and 7 told me, oh, I cannot relieve myself of these shortcomings or character defects. I need to humbly, not pridefully, but humbly ask my higher power to relieve me of my fear. And then I combined 6 and 7 with page 68. So before I walked up here, I said, I took 3 deep breaths. Somebody in these rooms had told me that John F. Kennedy had a tremendous fear of public speaking. They told him, take 3 deep breaths and ask God for help. And that's what he did. So I take 3 deep breaths. And then I step 1 it. I say, I'm powerless. God, I'm powerless over fear. I step 2, God, only you can restore me to sanity. Step 3, I'm turning this over to you, God. And then I combine step 7 and step on page 68, and I try to be as humble as I can and say, God, please remove my fear and direct me to what you would have me be. And it was slow at first. I almost had to read things, but now I still don't have the confidence to get up here without notes, but I don't really have a lot of fear of public speaking anymore, and it has worked for me. And I believe that formula, out in that world, you see lots of fear in sports and stuff where people miss a chip shot field goal under a pressure situation, or there's a lot of fear out there. And the number one realization to me is there's no realization that willpower is useless. That only turning for me to a higher power is the only way out of that fear. When I was drinking, and I had 2 young daughters, and I had them trained, I would come home from work and I'd say, "What's happening, girls?" And they would be playing on the living room floor, and they'd stand up with big smiles on their faces, and they'd point at me and they'd say, "You, baby, you." And we had a lot of fun with that. And after a while, I figured, I don't know if Child Protective Services would look too favorably on that, so we stopped it. But I read in the 24 hours a day book, a line that really got me, and it said, the path to happiness is indirect. The path to happiness is loving and serving others. And it's indirect because I think being greedy, gluttonous, selfish is my path to happiness, that I'm going to get what I want, and that's going to make me happy. And counterintuitively, it gave me exactly the opposite. There's a Crosby, Stills, Nash song called Woodstock. We all know. And there's a line in it that says, we got to get ourselves back to the garden. And I think I found a way, at least a way that works for me. And I heard an AA speaker by the name of Scott Lee from Tennessee, and he says, do good things and don't get caught. And what he was saying was, you do a good thing, instead of getting the ick in my stomach, I get an inner glow in my stomach. When I serve others, and I love others, I get an inner glow. That's good. I feel good. Makes me happy. And that's all I ever wanted. And he says, as soon as I tell somebody that I did a good thing, hey Bob, I helped a little old lady across the street. As soon as I say that, that's my pride coming in, that inner glow goes, bam, down. So that's what he means, that do good things and don't get caught. Certainly don't talk about them. I belong to, and there's several members here, an outdoor clean and sober club called OSAT, One Step at a Time, OSAT. We have meetings on top of Tiger Mountain, and the idea is to get a bunch of new people in sobriety to the top of Mount Rainier every year. And I'll be on the trail myself and by myself, and if I see a piece of trash, I pick it up, because I've dropped a lot of trash over the years. I'm just making up for that. But I cannot walk by it without feeling guilty. And certainly if I tell somebody I did it, I lose that inner glow. But it gives me a little bit of an inner glow, even when I'm just walking on a trail. So I think getting back to the Garden of Eden is doing loving and serving others and doing good things and don't get caught. So I'm trying to reverse the process that got me out of the Garden of Eden, that got me the ick in my stomach, which was selfish acts, shame, guilt, fear, followed by fear. And what if I do it a little bit differently? What if I do unselfish acts and I feel good and it makes me happy? So pretty much that works. Getting back to the Garden of Eden, which for me is feeling good and being happy. I was at a meeting in Hawaii once, and this fellow said, today I walk with my heroes as a peer. And I said, wow, that's powerful. Because I've always wanted to be a hero, but get to hang out with them? Well, that's even extra cool. And as I said, Roy Rogers and Superman don't make much sense in my adult life. And, there's a chapter 6, as it used to be pointed out to me by my sponsors, says into action. It doesn't say into thinking. It says into action. And I was listening to a Buddhist teacher, and he said, every single moment is high noon. We have the choice to take action, even if it's a positive thought, or we have the choice to give in to our fear and ego and shrink from the action. He said, every moment we are like Will Kane in High Noon. And High Noon is a 1952 movie. Will Kane won the Gary Cooper won the Academy Award. He played Will Kane. And he played, Will Kane is the town marshal, Hadleyville, New Mexico territory. And like a lot of movies, starts out with a lot of good people They're all having a good time. They're all good citizens. They joke around. And he's married, the marshal's recently married to Grace Kelly, and she's a pacifist, a Quaker, and she doesn't believe in violence. So he's retiring from being the marshal, and they're moving away to become a storekeeper in another town. And then they hear that a person they put in prison for murder and was to be hung has just been released from prison, and he's headed back to Hadleyville, and he's going to get vengeance on Will Kane and the rest of the town for sending him to prison. And waiting for him at the train station is his brother and 2 of their henchmen. So it's going to be 4 of them against the town. So Will Kane starts going around to all the good town folk, the storekeepers and the good citizens, and he says, we got to get ready for this. And they say, yeah, you're right. We got to get ready. We got to combat this. But one by one, the good town folk give in to their ego. They give in to their fear, and they say, I might die. I don't think I want to be involved in this. And Harry Morgan is the actor is the last townsperson. He tells his wife, when the marshal comes to the door, tell him I'm not here. And so Will Kane realizes he's all by himself and he can't take on 4. So he gets in their buckboard wagon with Grace Kelly and they head out of town. And then he stops it and he says, I can't do this. If I run, they will hunt me down. I will never have a peaceful day as long as I live if I don't stand up right now and do the right thing, take the right action. So the famous scene of High Noon is he's sitting, the camera comes shooting into Gary Cooper, Will Kane. He's in the middle of this dusty western town street all by himself. The clock is striking noon, and you hear the train whistle in the background. And so that's what and then what happens is that the 4 of them come after him. He gets 3 of them. And then the 4th is about ready to shoot him. And his wife, who has said, I'm leaving you, I'm going to be on the noon train out of here, she wings the 4th guy, and he kills the 4th guy. And some of the things I realized about that when that movie was pointed out to me is I've played all parts. I've been the bad guys. I've been the villains that are worried about my selfish conduct, my selfish misconduct. And I've been the townsperson that shrunk away, that cowardly says, I don't, this isn't for me. I don't think so. I've never said no in AA to a request, but I used to say no to requests a lot before I got here. I shrunk away. And I've been Grace Kelly. And I don't think we ought to be involved in violence here, and that's against my principles, so we just shouldn't be involved. And maybe every once in a while, certainly more now that I've been in the program, I get to be Will Kane every once in a while. And so every moment in time, the whistle's blowing, the train whistle's blowing, I can do the right thing, or I can shrink and do the cowardly thing. And sometimes it's just saying that prayer, God, remove my fear and direct me to what you have me be. When I go to that God consciousness, I have a better chance of becoming the hero and taking the right action. I have a better chance of doing good things and not getting caught. I have a better chance of loving and serving others. So, for me today, that's being a hero, is doing the right thing. And so today I really do claim to walk with my heroes as a peer, and very simply, you're all my heroes. You're part of my heroic group because this morning, if nothing else, you are doing the right thing. You're in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's very heroic. There's a lot of people that are hungover this morning. And so, I love you all. Thanks for listening. My name is Mike, and I'm an alcoholic.